I love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
The homies, what's popping guys? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. This one's going to be Corey Sandhagen versus Marlon Moraes, a really difficult main event to predict. I hope all of you guys enjoy these breakdowns and I'm going to catch you at the smoke break. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Bruno Silva, and we're going to start with Tagir, boys. So Tagir comes into this fight 12 wins, 1 loss as a pro, making his UFC debut. Tagir, like most Russians, he's primarily a grappler, combat sambo. If we look at his previous fights, it's clear to see why he's getting the opportunity to fight at the highest level. His grappling is very, very high level, very strong when he's able to get that body lock up against the fence. When he's in a striking situation, he's very composed. Looks to use the outside and inside calf kicks. Looks to catch your kicks too for that takedown. Bruno Silva comes into this fight 0 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. As of right now, Silva hasn't cut it at the highest level. Conditioning seems to be a weakness. More of a power striker than a technical striker. He was outclassed by Dvorak. Against Taha, we see that conditioning issue later on in that fight. In my opinion, the more skillful fighter is the Russian. Bruno Silva may look to use his jiu-jitsu if he's taken to the mat, but I don't think that'll be his best chance of winning this fight. I think the best chance of Silva winning this fight is to land a bomb. Just land a huge punch on the feet that's able to stop Ulanbekov. I'm going to side with the Russian though. He's more composed on the feet. The grappling looks very strong on tape. I'd expect him to replicate a previous performance in this fight where he clinches Bruno up against the fence, forces him to the mat. From there, he smothers and fatigues Bruno. So I'm going to take Ulanbekov via decision. My odds would be Ulan minus 250, Silva plus 190. And the actual odds are Ulanbekov minus 400, Bruno Silva plus 330. Wow. So a lot of faith going into the Russian, the debuting fighter. You can't really argue too much against it. You know, when you look at both of these guys, Tagir seems to be more high level. Bruno hasn't impressed me at the highest level as of right now. Be sure to let me know who you're taking below. Tracy Cortez versus Stephanie Egger. And we're going to start with Tracy. So Tracy comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, primarily a wrestler. We saw Tracy fight on the Contender Series. She displayed exactly what she's about. Her wrestling, by far the most impressive part of her game. Quite a green fighter, hasn't got a lot of MMA experience, but like we saw recently with Loma, another fighter who hasn't got a lot of MMA experience, but still advanced in one area of fighting, which is Muay Thai. Now, I don't believe Tracy is a specialist in wrestling, unless my research is wrong, but she still is primarily a wrestler, just not a wrestling specialist in my opinion. Stephanie Egger comes into this fight 5-1 as a pro, making her UFC debut. Stephanie is also primarily a grappler, judo, wrestling, and even BJJ. Her grappling seems of a wider variety than Tracy's. As for Stephanie's striking, I don't see that being a dangerous part of her game at the moment. But the good thing for her is she's in the same boat as Tracy. She's green in MMA. She's still learning. I think this is a brilliant matchup, competition-wise. Both ladies have grappled their way to the UFC. If both ladies do engage in that grappling contest, it'll be very interesting to see who has more success there. Like I said earlier, I do see Stephanie's grappling skill set being of a wider variety than Tracy's. But what if this fight stays kickboxing? In that situation, I would favour Tracy Cortez. Really difficult prediction to make, but for me, I do see this fight hitting the mat, maybe on a couple of occasions. If it does, I think Stephanie Egger will potentially edge out the grappling there. Maybe even submit Tracy Cortez. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Stephanie Egger via submission in round number 2. My line would be Egger -120, Tracy Cortez +100. It is still a difficult fight to predict. And the actual odds are Stephanie Egger +200, Tracy Cortez -220. Yeah, that's insane. You know, am I missing something in this matchup? Maybe a lot of people laying money on this fight think Tracy Cortez will keep this kickboxing. And if she does, she can win this fight. But from the tape we've seen, Tracy Cortez likes to wrestle. And I think if she does, Stephanie Egger has a brilliant chance in this fight. +200, in my opinion, is pretty off. Pretty off. Let me know what you think below. Giga Chikadze versus Omar Moraes. What a matchup this is. Let's start with Giga. So Giga comes into this fight 3 wins, 0 losses inside the UFC. Giga is a kickboxer, a way better kicker than a puncher. His kicking ability is pretty much second to none. I'd say maybe a level or 2 below Barboza, which really puts into words how much of a good kicker I believe this guy is. Technique more so than power with everything he's doing. As for his MMA experience, his wrestling experience, it's not really there yet. He's green in MMA, but his camp is a great camp, King's MMA. The opponent, Omar Moraes, comes into this fight 2-0 inside the UFC. Omar had a really good fight recently with Gabriel Benitez. Such a close fight in all honesty. The difference being Omar was just more powerful. His strikes meant more in the eyes of the judges. The power that Omar possesses seems to be his most dangerous weapon. Also training at a very good camp in Hard Knocks 365. Super difficult one to make a prediction on. If Giga can utilise a lot of movement, look to keep Omar in a kickboxing battle, but manage distance, I think he could do well. Omar will need to close the kicking distance, look to dirty Giga up, just be nasty in there. Maybe even look to wrestle with Giga to fatigue him, you know, slow down that movement. I think either side is a good pick, but for me, I'm going to take Giga. A lot of people fade this guy, you know, we expect him to be taken down and controlled on the mat, kept on his back, but he's shown a lot of good improvements in there since that Contender Series fight. So I'm going to take Giga to use his kickboxing to score on Omar and win via decision. My odds would be Giga -140, Omar +110. Although I'm taking Giga, I wouldn't price Omar out too much. I think he's a very powerful striker who's always in with a good chance. If he can stick to his game plan, absolutely he could win this fight. And the actual odds are Omar -140, Giga +120, +110. So yeah, it's basically reverse. That's another underdog I'm taking who I would give a slightly better chance to. But I'm not going to complain at the odds too much. Omar has been impressive too. He's a powerful guy. And if he's able to use good pressure, I think he could beat Giga. But if Giga utilises that movement, then it's a very interesting fight. Ali Al-Qaizi versus Tony Kelley. And we're going to start with Ali. So Ali comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. We saw Ali debut just a couple months ago. I took Ali as an underdog in that fight and I actually felt he done well. My scorecard had him winning that fight, but it was a close one. Ali loves to grapple, fights at a high pace, looks to take you to the mat. From there, he's in his world. We saw in his debut that his striking really isn't that bad. It's not bad at all. Definitely a good addition to the UFC. Tony Kelley comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Also debuted just a few weeks ago. Tony had a brilliant debut fight, took a lot of damage from Kai, but also dished out a lot of his own striking too. In all honesty, Tony Kelley could have won that fight if there wasn't a minute break towards the end of that last round. I don't know how many of you guys remember that, but that minute break could have helped change the direction of that fight. The real difference, in my opinion, is the kickboxing. I think Tony Kelley really showed us in his debut that he's super durable and a very good kickboxer himself. If the fight stays on the feet, I think Tony has the bigger moments in there. Potentially even finishes Ali. But I'm going to take this one to go the distance And I'll take Tony Kelley to get that decision win. My odds would be somewhat close. I'd have Tony Kelley minus 150, Ali coming back plus 120. And the actual odds are Tony Kelley minus 220. Wow. Ali coming back plus 190, plus 180. Should be a little bit closer, I believe. But, you know, Tony Kelley, rightfully the favourite in my opinion. But minus 220, it's getting to the point where it looks like there's good value on Ali. But ultimately, the value pick is the winner. So, yeah, minus 220, Tony Kelley, that is going to be my pick. Impa Kasanganai versus Buckley. Buckley is the fighter that fought the UFC GA famous Home Alone Kevin Holland just a few weeks ago. But we're going to start with Impa. Impa comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, debuted against Maki Pitolo, showed us a performance even better than his Contender Series fight. Impa has brilliant conditioning, his striking is quite composed, doesn't get too aggressive, stays very composed. He did mix his tempo up against Maki, but for the most part, Impa is very composed with whatever he's doing. He's a strong fighter up against the fence too. You can see the potential this fighter has. Buckley comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. TKO loss in his UFC debut. Home Alone, what can we say? You know, he's getting better and better every fight. Really impressive stuff from Kevin Holland. I did take a shot on Buckley in that fight. I felt if he could get close to Kevin and land a big punch, he could win that fight. I do believe in something similar for this matchup. That's not going to be my pick though. I believe Impa has better cardio, better fundamentals than Buckley. I think Buckley will show weaknesses again, such as using too much energy, searching for that knockout, fatiguing quicker than he should. Impa will look to stay composed in there. If he does, I think he could actually finish Buckley at some point in this fight. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Impa via TKO in round number 3. My odds would be Impa minus 200, Buckley plus 150. And the actual odds are Impa minus 250, Buckley plus 210. Can't disagree with it too much this time, you know. I would price Impa minus 2. He's a little bit more than that, minus 250. Reasons for that are, like I said earlier, you can see the potential in this fighter. How can you go against him in this spot? Buckley will have to do more than what he done against Holland, you know. He went in there, simply tried to knock Holland out. It didn't work. He was outclassed. He could be outclassed again in this fight. Let me know who you're taking below, guys. We have Rodrigo Nascimento versus Kyle Daukaus. We're going to start with Rodrigo. So Rodrigo comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Rodrigo is primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter. For those of you who are very, very new to watching MMA, a jiu-jitsu fighter is a guy who looks to fold your body up, or strangulate you, or break something. Jiu-jitsu is a self-defense art, very, very effective in MMA. Nascimento had success with his jiu-jitsu against Don'Tale Mayes and on the Contender Series too. Kyle Daukaus comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Kyle was more than impressive in his UFC debut. I went against him in that fight, and man, his boxing sharpness really had me second guessing my pick early on in that fight. Kyle is very quick for his size. The boxing clearly being his chosen way of winning. It's pretty clear, this one. If Rodrigo is able to take down Kyle, chances are he's going to have his way with Kyle on the mat. Now, if Kyle can stay on the feet, look to kickbox, chances are he's going to have his way with Nascimento. It really is a difficult prediction to make. It's really a case of which one you prefer more. For me, I think the Brazilian will be able to take down Kyle. And because of that, I favour him more in this fight. Now, if I felt Kyle could stay upright, I would probably take him in this fight. But my pick is going to be Rodrigo via submission in round number 1. My odds would be Rodrigo minus 170, Kyle plus 140. And the actual odds are Rodrigo minus 260. Wow. Kyle Daukaus plus 220. I don't know if my odds are just off, but again, man, I do disagree with this line. Rodrigo, rightfully the favourite. But Kyle Daukaus showed us in his UFC debut, he is very quick with his hands, very technical. That UFC debut performance alone should have him less than plus 220. My pick is going to be on the Brazilian, but slightly overpriced. Let me know what you think of this line and who you're taking in the comments below. Tom Breeze versus KB Buller, and we're going to start with Tom. So Tom comes into this fight 4 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. A well-rounded fighter is Tom Breeze. Good boxing, strong grappling, his jiu-jitsu is underrated too. He can definitely compete in most areas of the game. The problem is his mindset. He has anxiety, so it really depends which Tom Breeze turns up. He could pull out of the fight on the day of the fight. Tom Breeze is coming off a loss to Brendan Allen, just technically outclassed. I took the plus money on Allen that night, very impressed with his performance. KB comes into this fight 8-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. I'll start by saying finding tape to watch on KB has been pretty hard. I haven't seen much. What I do know though is he's a Muay Thai fighter that doesn't mind mixing it up with some groundwork. I don't think you can ever be too confident in taking Tom Breeze, but I am going to take him here. Like I said earlier, Tom Breeze really is a well-rounded guy. He's a strong grappler, a very good boxer. If he can just simply mix it up in this fight, I think he could edge out KB. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Tom Breeze via decision. My odds would be Tom Breeze minus 140, KB plus 110. Tom Breeze minus 260, KB plus 220. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. So the line basically says Tom Breeze is going to go in there and blow KB Buller out the water. I would love him to do that. I'm not going to lie. I would love him to do that, but it really depends which Tom shows up, you know? He's been second guessing himself lately, and that scares me because the mental side of fighting is huge. Skill wise, I would say yeah, okay, over minus 200 skill wise, that's fair, but Tom Breeze, he needs to put it together in this fight. I believe he can do it, but I'm favouring more of a mix it up for 15 minutes, get a decision win. But if Tom can go in there and blow KB out of the water and warrant that minus 250, man, I'm impressed. Alright, homies, you know what time it is. Please. See, look at that. You say please, and then life changes it a little bit for you. It changes. You don't like it, you know, just have some patience, and then it works. As always, guys, if you waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking this whole time, amen. If you're not a smoker but you enjoy the smoke breaks, triple amen, my homies. I've been thinking recently, like, the community I have, the community that I'm growing, like, I see so many people with the same, like a similar mindset to what I have. And when I say that, I don't mean like fight predictions, right? I mean like life mindset, the mindset you should have every day. And I see that more and more with the interactions I have with a few of you guys on Instagram. Like, so many people have like this cool mindset, and I can kind of see more and more now how this community has grown, like how it's happened. You know, it's weird, man. Sometimes I just sit back, have a smoke, and think about it, and it's crazy. It's crazy, guys. We do have to speak a little bit about last weekend. Now, I don't want to run through all of the fights and recap all of them. Someone mentioned to me that I should do those videos, a recap video on Sundays, and that's a really good idea. Just finding the time to do it is the problem. But yeah, Sunday recaps, I'm trying to fit in. Do want to speak about a few performances. Casey Kenny's really stood out to me. Loma Lookboonmee, both of those had really good kicking performances. Super impressive. Now, the main event. First of all, you know, if you make a wrong prediction, right, and you're not happy with how your, the fighter you picked, if you're not happy with how they fought, that's fair. That's fair. But you must still give the credit to the opponent, right? So Holly Holm, I want to start by giving that woman a lot of credit. She's been at the top of the fight game for a long time. Got head kicked by Amanda Nunes, but she still proves it. She proves it time and time again. This is why I'm still at the top of the game. I may not have the title, but this is why I'm still here. Her movement was really good. The side kicks, the wrestling, it was a factor in the fight. Massive credit to Holly Holm, right? But Aldana, man, it was a little bit painful to watch. I'm not gonna lie. The way she followed Holly for 25 minutes with no jabs, no low kicks, hardly no aggression. The output was low. And it was the same movement path for 25 minutes. She never looked to go in towards the other hand. It was weird. It was painful to watch from Aldana. I really feel like, the fighter I picked wasn't the fighter that I was watching in that main event. Now, like I said, you give credit to Holly. She was a reason as to why Aldana didn't look too good. But at the same time, I have to be honest, man. Aldana's performance, she's better than that. She really is better than that. But we move on, right? If you picked Holly Holm, great pick. If you picked Aldana, I'm sure you have similar thoughts to what I have. But we move on. This week, we've got a lot of good fights. Marlon Moraes and Corey Sandhagen, man. Oh my God, guys. We're going to be split on that. I can see the comment section right now. Just Marlon takers, Corey takers. We're going to be split on that one. I hope you guys had a beautiful smoke break. If you disagree with what I said, let me know. If you agree with what I said, let me know. And yeah, Instagram, man. Hit me up on Instagram if you haven't already. I enjoy chatting to you guys on Insta. Really, really cool people. Alright, guys, let's get into this main card. Youssef Zalal versus Ilir Topuria. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly. We're going to start with Zalal. So Zalal comes into this fight 3-0 inside the UFC. How would we describe Youssef? Primarily a striker, I would guess. His defensive wrestling is very good. Can also choose to mix it up with his own takedowns. The highlight of his skill set, though, in my opinion, is his movement. The speed of Zalal, along with his movement, really is impressive. Came close to finishing Barrett in his last fight. Had success with a beautiful head kick. Very close to finishing that fight. Ilir comes into this fight 8-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. Primarily a submission wrestler. Ilir is taking this fight on short notice. Rightfully getting the opportunity at the highest level. Quite a skilled fighter when it comes to implementing his wrestling. As for his striking, I've seen him rip to the body a few times. Looks really technical with the body strikes. As for how unorthodox he'll get with his striking, he's quite basic there. Single strikes up top, nothing too unorthodox. I do believe there's a speed difference in this fight. Movement and the ability to mix it up with striking attacks. I think that goes towards Zalal. Now, if Ilir can use really good pressure, look to force that takedown, then it's going to get very interesting. I'm sure we're going to be somewhat split on this fight, but I think Zalal is able to utilize good movement inside the bigger octagon. And because of that, I think Zalal more than likely outscores Ilir, edges out potentially close rounds. So I'm going to take Zalal via decision. My odds would be Zalal minus 150, Ilir plus 120. Youssef Zalal minus 180, Ilir plus 160. I agree with it. A lot of money going on Youssef Zalal, and you can understand why. The UFC debut to the last fight, really impressive. The guy is showing us how quick he is, the movement, the wrestling, the conditioning. He's a good fighter, man. Has a lot of potential. Ilir will have to use good pressure and look to grapple. That's his path to victory. If he can't do that, I think Zalal is going to have a masterclass on the feet. Let me know who you're taking below. Tom Aspinall versus Alan Baudot, and we're going to start with the Englishman. So Tom comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, primarily a Muay Thai striker, training partner of Darren Tills. Tom has very good agility for his size, isn't the biggest heavyweight in the world, but he fights exactly the way his body type should. He's very quick, moves very, very well. As for his Muay Thai striking, very clean, powerful, quick. We saw that in his debut, the way he set down Jake Collier. Beautiful stuff from Tom Aspinall. The opponent, Alan Baudot, comes into this fight 8 wins, 1 loss as a pro, making his UFC debut. Alan is primarily a Muay Thai striker, just like Tom Aspinall. Alan was badly knocked out by now UFC fighter, champion Daukaus. Basically got very aggressive and it was a bad knockout too. Brutal knockout. I do believe there's a big skill gap in this matchup. From watching Tom to watching Alan, I think Tom is quite a few levels above Alan. Technically way more sound. Looks to be more dangerous with his ability. I'd expect Tom to control the octagon too. If he isn't controlling the octagon, it could be a similar case of Alan getting over aggressive and Tom lands a big counterpunch. For me, I'm taking the Englishman, Tom Aspinall, via TKO in round number 2. My odds would be Tom Aspinall -300, Baudot +250. Like I said, I do believe there is a skill gap in the striking for this matchup, so that's why I would price Tom Aspinall quite deep. And the actual line, Tom Aspinall -500, Alan Baudot +400. A lot of gamblers on this line are seeing the skill difference between Tom Aspinall and Alan Baudot. Can't disagree. Tom Aspinall, in my opinion, just a few levels above. So clean and quick with his Muay Thai. Alan Baudot, not technically as good. Daukaus du Plessis versus Marcus Perez. And what a name, by the way. Daukaus du Plessis. Beautiful. Du Plessis is a K1 kickboxer. However, this man loves to use his submission skills. Many rear naked choke wins. Loves to take your back. So skill set wise, I like what I see from Du Plessis. A good kickboxer who has a lot of good experience. His choke game. I mean, if you give this guy your neck, he's going for it. His submission skills, very, very good. The kickboxing, I like that too. Not the best puncher in the world. He does come forward, leaves his head on the centre line a bit, but this guy's been in a couple difficult fights from the tape I've seen and impressive. Finds a way to get it done. He's come through some adversity here and there, but man, like I say, the kickboxing is decent. The submission skills is decent. The opponent, Marcus Perez, comes into this fight 2 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a grappler, a jiu-jitsu fighter. Marcus has never been a damaging striker. He gets kind of wild with his strikes. Doesn't have a solid fundamental game with his striking. The area in which Marcus looks good, it's purely the grappling. If he can take you down, continue to keep you in that grappling match, he does have somewhat of a good success there. The kickboxing is quite clear in my opinion. Du Plessis is the better fighter there. The grappling, I would still give maybe a slight edge to Marcus Perez. But having said that, I do think that Du Plessis can compete more in the grappling than Marcus Perez can in the striking. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Du Plessis via decision. Could he submit Perez? Maybe. Like I said, if you give this guy your neck, he will attack it. But Perez is a decent grappler himself, so Du Plessis decision seems a little bit more fair to me. My odds would be Du Plessis -160, Perez +130. And the actual odds are Du Plessis -150, -160, Perez +130, +125. So a few of you guys will take Marcus Perez, but for me, I'm on the newcomer, and I'm sure a few of you guys also will be on the newcomer. Ben Rothwell versus Marcin Tybura, and we're going to start with Ben. So Ben comes into this fight 8 wins, 6 losses inside the UFC. A fighter that's been around for a while, 50 MMA fights in his career, maybe should look to retire for quality of life later on. However, Ben has chosen to keep fighting. So let's talk about what Ben's good at. Against OSP, he chose to use the clinch up against the fence. Against Stefan Struve, he was more dangerous up against the fence. Now you look at Ben against Arlovski. He got beaten up pretty badly in that fight. Against Blagoy, he wasn't active enough with his pressure. Ben seems to be doing better when he clinches up against the fence. Marcin Tybura comes into this fight 6 wins, 5 losses inside the UFC. A striker and grappler. Very decent kickboxing skills. Very decent jiu-jitsu. Marcin is coming off a win to Max Grishin. A similar performance to Rothwell against OSP, where Marcin basically grappled his way to victory up against the fence. Marcin, just like Ben, seems to be doing better recently when he's grappling his opponent rather than kickboxing with his opponent. Marcin is probably technically better with his kickboxing, but Ben, in my opinion, more likely to land a fight-ending punch. If we see both of these guys engage with the grappling, I think Ben is probably the stronger fighter up against the fence. Maybe Marcin looks for takedowns up against the fence rather than looking to strike. This fight really could go either way, but I think Ben Rothwell could just hold Marcin up against the fence, wear him down round by round. At some point, I think Ben could hurt Marcin, or like I said, round by round just wear on him. My pick is going to be Ben Rothwell via TKO in round number 2. My odds would be Ben -130, Marcin +100. And the actual odds are Ben Rothwell -160, Marcin +140. Not too far away from the actual odds there. I would agree, Ben Rothwell rightfully the favourite. Marcin, what would be the best path to victory here? Maybe look to take Ben down, use his jiu-jitsu. If he's kickboxing, I think it could go well, but at some point Ben Rothwell maybe sets him down with a big punch. It's difficult to be confident in either side, but my pick is going to be Ben Rothwell in this fight. Edson Barboza versus Makwan Amirkhani. Man, this is a matchup. We're going to start with the Brazilian. So Edson comes into this fight 14 wins, 9 losses inside the UFC. As most of you know, his record definitely doesn't do him justice. Edson is a super high level striker. His kicking ability is arguably the best we've ever seen. The power and speed in all of his kicks is truly terrifying. Low, to the body, or to the head. You don't want to take too many kicks from Edson Barboza. We've seen the results of that. The opponent, Makwan Amirkhani, comes into this fight 6 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Makwan had over 500 wrestling matches just growing up as a teenager. That wrestling background is really what got him to the highest level of the game. He's coming off a win over Danny Henry, synced in another anaconda choke. He loves to go for that choke. Makwan isn't the best striker, but he can compete in a striking battle too. Makwan has to implement his foundation of wrestling to have success in this fight. Barboza has to implement his foundation of kicking to have success in this fight. It really comes down to Barboza's takedown defense. If you think Barboza will be difficult to take down, then I think you have to side with Barboza's striking being the difference. If you think Makwan can take and keep Barboza down, then I think you have to side with Makwan's wrestling being the difference. I personally think Barboza will be difficult to take down. He's fought at 155 his whole career. He's experienced with strong wrestlers. Granted, Barboza isn't the greatest wrestler himself. You know, Khabib mauled him, Kevin Lee mauled him. Could Makwan maul him too? Maybe in the first round, but can he keep it up? Against Shane Burgos, he had success in the first round, but couldn't keep it up. Could that be a similar case for this matchup? My odds would be Barboza minus 150, Mac 1 plus 120. I would really price it that close. And the actual odds are Edson Barboza minus 250, Mac 1 plus 220. If Barboza's on the feet, okay, yeah, minus 250 for sure. The striking is just that good. One of the best kickers we've ever seen. But if Mac 1 can get it to the fence, if Mac 1 can take Barboza down and fatigue him, then minus 260, that's crazy. I feel, Barboza should be closer to minus 150, minus 160, but again, he's an elite striker. Main event, guys, and before we get into it, I'd like to ask you guys to use your own techniques on these like buttons for whatever prediction you watch, whether it be just the main event, co-main event and main, or I know most of you guys are full card hardcores, so yeah, make sure you smash down the like buttons. Okay, Marlon Moraes versus Corey Sandhagen. And we're going to start with Marlon. So Marlon comes into this fight 5 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker. Marlon has been very impressive so far in his UFC career. Brutal knockouts against Aljo and Rivera really highlights what Marlon can do. He's a very dangerous fighter. Where has Marlon been weak? Cardio. We've begun to learn that if you can weather the storm, you can drown Marlon in a cardio battle. Henry Cejudo showed us that. Aldo kinda showed us that too. The opponent, Corey Sandhagen, comes into this fight 5 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Corey is basically the modern day Dominic Cruz. I've been saying that pretty much since his first fight. I do currently have a 100% record for picking Sandhagen's fights. I've taken him in every one of his fights, apart from his most recent fight against Aljamain Sterling. Sandhagen is really good at what he does, mixes up his attacks, switches stances a lot, basically keeps you guessing constantly. What's coming next? Dominic Cruz / Tony Ferguson type of fighter. I mentioned Tony because Corey will get very unorthodox with his submission attacks. One moment he's firing a tricky combination, the next he's jumping for an armbar. Marlon, in my opinion, is the more damaging striker. When Marlon finds the target, you can see the effect it has on the opponent. If Marlon can't finish Corey inside those first 10 minutes, then you'd really expect Sandhagen's conditioning and output to win those last 15 minutes of the fight. Man, it's really difficult to be confident in either side because Marlon is dangerous for 10 minutes. Sandhagen is going to be way more dangerous outside of those 10 minutes. I'm going to take the Brazilian to finish this fight either in the first or second round. If that doesn't happen, I do anticipate Corey picking up a decision, going on to win round 3, round 4, round 5. Or even potentially finishing Marlon late in that fight. So, yeah, I can see a finish for both guys. I can see a decision for only one guy. So, my probability is probably a little bit more for Corey. But I have a feeling inside those first 10 minutes, Marlon could really hurt Corey. He has to use his kicks, look to kick Corey's legs, take away that movement. Because if he doesn't, then Corey is going to drown him in a cardio battle, an output battle. Really, really tough main event to predict, but I am going to side with the Brazilian to get a TKO in round number 2. My line would literally be Marlon minus 110, Corey minus 110. I do believe this is the toughest fight to predict on this card. And the actual numbers are Corey minus 130, Marlon plus 110. You can't argue with it, Marlon is getting some respect with those really short underdog odds. Those first 10 minutes are going to be very, very interesting. Could Marlon potentially finish Corey? Those first 10 minutes, man, I wouldn't say no. Outside of that, again, it's going to be interesting because you'd expect Marlon to be slow by now. And Corey could really drown him, and it could happen quick too. Alright guys, let me know who you're taking in this main event spot. I'm sure we're going to be split. If you want to be homies outside of YouTube, we can do that on Instagram at UFC Lay. Alright guys, peace.